World history is the study of the past from a global perspective. It looks at history across different regions, cultures, and time periods, emphasizing the connections and interactions between them.
Now listen to part of a talk in a world history class. The Prophet Muhammad started publicly preaching his strict brand of monotheism in the year 613 by reciting the Quran, quickly convincing some of the commoners of Mecca to believe in him. Most of his early converts belonged to groups of people who had failed to achieve any significant social mobility, which, of course, included many of the poor. His followers memorized his recitations and message that called for the powerful to take care of the weak, a message that resonated with many of these economically and socially marginalized. Muhammad's message challenged the Umayyads' clan leadership of society. The most powerful branch of the Quraysh tribe, the Umayyads had been enriching themselves from the lucrative caravan trade, while at the same time ignoring the hardships of the needy. The political implications were clear. The Muslims threatened to disrupt a delicate equilibrium. The Prophet's message jeopardized the social and economic standing of the elite members of society. Question: why does the professor discuss the Umayyad clan? What does the professor mean when she says this? The political implications were clear. The Muslims threatened to disrupt a delicate equilibrium. Now listen to part of a talk in a world history class. Most scholars agree that the Ice Age played a fundamental role in the rise of agriculture. It was impossible during the much colder and often ice-covered period of the Pleistocene, but inevitable during the Holocene thawing. Only 4,000 years before the origins of agriculture, the planting of anything would have been extremely difficult. Not only were today's fertile farmlands of Spain or the North American Great Plains covered in ice, but also other areas around the world could not depend on constant temperatures or rainfall from year to year. Pleistocene foragers had to be flexible. The warming trend of the Holocene, by contrast, resulted in consistent rainfall amounts and more predictable temperatures. This alteration in habitat could have led to the extinction of megafauna, like mammoths. In the Pleistocene age, humans hunted these large beasts and relied on them for food. Therefore, as animal populations declined, humans were further encouraged to plant and cultivate seeds in newly thawed soil. Question: what encouraged humans to plant and cultivate seeds? Why does the professor mention the Pleistocene period? Now listen to part of a talk in a world history class. Confucius lived just prior to the Warring States period. What little we know about his life comes primarily from the Analects, a record of conversations Confucius held with his students compiled after he died. In later centuries, in China, Confucius was revered as a sage, and even today, outside of China, some people might think of him as a strict teacher. However, in the context of his time, Confucius was anything but stiff, and rather a dynamic individual who believed he was mandated by heaven to return the world to a more socially and politically harmonious time. The Analects not only shows a serious and learned man, but also someone capable in archery and horsemanship, who loved music and ritual, and who untiringly traveled the feudal states in the hopes of serving as an aid to various landowners. Question: what is the lecture mainly about? What does the professor imply about Confucius? Now listen to part of a talk in a world history class. Although the 11th century was in many ways Western Europe's lowest point, it would also see the beginnings of Western Europe's re-urbanization. One reason for these beginnings was that in those lands that had been part of the Western Roman Empire, city walls often remained, even if these cities had largely emptied of people. During the chaos and mayhem of the 10th and 11th centuries, people often gathered in walled settlements for protection. Many of these old walled cities thus came to be reoccupied. Another reason for the growth of towns came with a revival of trade in the 11th century. This revival of trade can be traced to several causes. In the first place, Europe's knights, as a warrior aristocracy, had such a strong demand for luxury goods, both locally manufactured products and imported goods such as silks and spices from Asia. Bishops, the great lords of the church, had a similar demand. As such, markets grew up in the areas around castles and churches, and thus caused the formation of towns that served as market centers. Moreover, Viking raids had also led to a greater seaborne trade in the North Sea and Atlantic. Often, Viking-founded markets served as the center of new towns, especially in those lands where the Romans had never established a state and which were not urbanized at all. The Irish city of Dublin, for example, had begun as a Viking trading post. Question: what is the professor's opinion of Western Europe in the 11th century? Why does the professor mention the Irish city of Dublin?